guys, welcome back. It's Elise and this is my mom.
Hello. Hi guys.
Thank you for coming on my channel today. We're gonna talk all things the climate crisis. Now, being from a different generation, I'm sure you have different sorts of views and takes on the climate crisis, and if you even think it's a crisis and what you think about it in general. So I just want to pick your brains about that and have a conversation. In one of my previous videos, I talk about starting conversations and how to have meaningful ones and being able to communicate without having an argument or a debate. So I just thought I would take that onto my channel and show you guys it happening, not in real time because I am gonna edit this video. Again, thank you for agreeing to do this.
You're welcome.
What are your thoughts just initially on the climate crisis in general? What do you think about it?
I think things are changing, definitely, and not for the better.
Not for the better?
Not for the better.
You mean like in how? What
well, I mean like the hurricanes, for instance, that hit New Orleans this past summer was very intense, and we've had more every year. We have hurricanes that are getting increasingly stronger and more frequent. We're having to deal with it more. The tornadoes that just hit not too long ago in Kentucky.
In December?
I mean,
that's not right. We
celebrated Christmas and it was 80 degrees here, which is not normal. It's 20 degrees warmer than it should. I mean, it's typically warm in South Louisiana. I think something's going on, and I think there's things that we can do as a population to help reduce these adverse effects, and we're not doing it. And just for a simple thing, like I've moved out into a more rural community and we don't even have recycling here. We don't even have the option to have recycling here. And honestly, 80% of my waste I could recycle.
That's a big problem. We're gonna have to call them. We will call them. We will. And I'm sure that's frustrating, like knowing you could recycle.
Yes, because where I lived prior, we did recycle, and we had 3 or 4 bins, and they would be full every single week. Of course, we had 3 children too, but it's just me living here now. But
there's a lot you can still recycle.
Yes.
Like a lot.
I mean, if you look at my trash can right now, like I said, 80% of it could be recycled and reused, and it's just going to a landfill. I don't know where it's going actually.
Yeah, it could be going to China, it could be going to Philippines,
going in our
Indonesia, the oceans, exactly. So, well, that's good to know that you are aware that bad things are happening, because I feel like a lot of people will deny that the climate crisis is even a thing, or they just are like, oh no, it's supposed to be warm, or like, oh, look at this, it's actually colder than it was last year, and it's not really like a day-by-day thing, it's an overall trend of warming. And yeah, it's pretty insane, but that's good to know that you're aware.
I'm aware, but unfortunately I haven't been as proactive as I could to take steps, and I think that's everybody's problem. Is we're aware that there's a problem out there, but to actually take action and do something proactive to reduce these waste and try to change our consumption of goods, we're lacking in that. We just, oh well, it's not offered, or we don't, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
We just go with the flow.
Yeah, well, that brings me to another point of, it's not really your responsibility to do all this. Like, your government should be taking care of you in a way that you're able to recycle your waste, or drive an electric car, or have public transportation options. Like, those things are not within your control necessarily. But what about electing politicians and representatives that are big on the climate crisis? Or is it such a thing that they're aligned with other things that you don't like?
Well, I think there's just so many problems that are even more pertinent than, or they feel is more pertinent than climate change. I mean, here we are, we live in America, and you have people without health care. You have children who are starving every night, who aren't being educated every day, who do not have a safe home to live in. And those things, I mean, I guess because the climate change is a slow, it's not so in your face as these other things.
Yeah.
they take priority over the climate change. And no one's come up with, that I know of, a good cost-effective way to approach climate change.
Interesting. I mean, there's gonna be a lot more damage to pay for climate change than if we were proactive and like would spend the money now. It's kind of like the reverse of an investment. You spend a lot now and don't have to spend any later, versus having to keep spending to rebuild and pay for all this damage.
Problem.
Exactly. And then just keep having to deal with it over and over and keep paying for it over and over. But I mean, climate change is not an isolated thing. It's actually pertains to a lot of inequities and a lot of injustices, such as healthcare. Like, a lot of communities are put in these areas where, like Cancer Alley and Baton Rouge, for example, a lot of those families are not white families, they're people of color, so they don't have like the healthcare that they need, and they're also living in this area where there's a ton of air pollution, so they have a lot of asthma, or they have cancer rates that are a lot higher, and that comes along with climate change. So I think if you looked at it in a different scope, you would realize how much climate change really does play a part in all these other issues too.
And I don't think people realize that, or they don't want to address it.
It's really a nuanced issue with like racism and inequity and injustice and racial discrimination and the way our system is set up. So in America, at least it is. So,
well, I kind of disagree with that, because I think climate change doesn't discriminate. It affects us all.
Okay, I hear what you're saying, but I disagree 100%, because a lot of, like, let's say ocean nations are not white people. They are gonna face the climate crisis first. And so it's like Malaysia, Philippines, Indonesia, those sorts of areas that are going to get flooded, and they've done the least to contribute to climate change, and they're getting the most of it. Versus us here, I mean, in Louisiana, it's going to be completely ripped through the river delta. You know, if you look at maps predicting like sea level rise and with hurricanes and stuff, it's just like Louisiana's gone. Then also, like I was saying, like black and brown, people of color communities, they do get more effects of the climate crisis because they are inhaling most of that pollution, or they're living next to toxic landfills or on chemical spills, like the Gulf Coast when BP oil spill happened. Poor people that are gonna face the brunt of that. And systemically, thank you. Systemically, a lot of the poor communities are people of color.
My point was, the climate doesn't discriminate.
Right.
It's going to affect us all. That's what I meant by that.
And my point is, yes, absolutely, but at different rates. So at first, it's gonna wipe out the low income or frontline communities and indigenous communities, and then it's gonna creep up to like the northern hemisphere, is what I'm saying.
Right.
So eventually, yes, but as of right now, I think the point you made earlier about it's not so in your face, well, it's not so in our face here, but in other places it's already happening. Like, it's already doomsday. That was a great discussion, great conversation, because that was like the political side of climate change that I think is really hard to wrap your head around, because like you said, there's no end all be all. But I also think you made a great point in connecting that people aren't realizing that climate change does affect all of those other points that you brought up about like needing healthcare and stuff. Because if we don't pollute, people aren't gonna like
be sick.
They're not gonna be sick. They're not gonna have cancer and like need the healthcare as badly as they do if it were just a clean air, clean water, clean land. So, but I want to ask you about your environmental upbringing and your relationship to nature, and like, were you super outdoorsy, or what was your relationship growing up?
I was super outdoorsy growing up. We had a garden that my dad had in the backyard that was probably, I don't know how big. It was big because we had to weed the garden. We all had our own row that we had to weed. So we sustained ourselves a lot during this, especially during the summertime. We had tomatoes and corn and bell peppers and green beans and, you know, pretty much all of our vegetables that we ate.
That's awesome.
Came out of our own garden. And then I got real earthy, and as a science project I had an earthworm farm.
Oh.
And you could just see how that those well, they're not animals, but not reptiles, but
amphipods.
Whatever, worms. How you could put any kind of trash in there and they would just eat whatever.
Yeah.
But the better you fed them, the better they were. Meaning if you fed them vegetables and you kept their soil moist and, things like that. So, I mean, just like Elisa's saying with the underprivileged, I mean, if you feed them junk, they're not going to produce and they can't sustain themselves. And
very true.
And the big fat healthy worms were the ones that were fed, good food.
Yeah, I didn't know you had an earthworm farm. I haven't. Well, it's not really a farm.
It was my 7th grade science project.
Oh my gosh, did you keep it after? Or?
They ran away.
Oh no.
Because apparently they're scared of lightning and thunder, and you have to keep a light bulb on them.
Okay, to keep them
underground.
Yeah.
And they ran out of their boxes.
They're like escape artists, so they're pretty good at that. I have a worm farm, so like mother, like daughter. It's really cool.
I mean, I saw that firsthand as a little kid.
Obviously, I've been to where you grew up and been taking fishing and like done the whole crickets and worms and river tubing and all sorts of things that like are outdoorsy and very naturey. So I know you're not like far removed from nature.
No, I love nature.
Yeah, so it just makes me wonder why people such as yourself aren't as concerned with climate change. Is it because you feel like you just can't do anything?
I guess feels like maybe one person's not going to make that big of a difference, which is probably the wrong attitude to have, because if one gets together with someone else and there's 2 and then there's 4 and then there's 10 and then there's 1,000,000.
Exactly.
So.
No, I mean, it's definitely easy to be discouraged about everything.
And just like the recycling thing here, it comes back to the economy. They'll probably, if we call, they'll say, oh yeah, we'll bring you a recycle bin, but it's going to cost you $20 a month.
Yeah, right.
And then people will go like, do I want to spend $20 on separating my trash, or just throw it all in one bin and be done with it? And it comes down to an economic.
Well, you know what? I feel like if we go knocking on doors and asking your neighbors if they want to recycle, and y'all get like enough people that call, it will be free. Because it might be $20 for you, but if it's for the whole area, they might be like, well, we're picking up all this trash. We'll just like do a whole area pickup. I mean, yes, it's easy to feel like down about everything, but you do have to realize like one individual will inspire people, whether they tell you that or not. Just getting together with your neighbors and talking about it could do a lot that you didn't realize that they care about too. What were you taught as a child about climate? Because I know in the 80s, the 70s is when Earth Day became a thing. So you must have had some sort of climate education, like at some point.
I don't recall any like formal. I mean, I was in the Indian Princesses and the Girl Scouts, so of course those organizations were big into, nature and earth. It was just a program that the YMCA had set up, and it was about taking care of the earth. It was like going back to the Indians' times. I mean, they would give you different tasks that you would have to do, and most of them had something to do with the earth or building things to, sustain yourself. It's a lot like the Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, except you would get feathers, like different color feathers.
Well, did you learn anything from that you...
Yes, we went camping out. You had to take care of yourself, at least for the weekend. We went to camps for the week, learned lots of good stuff. It takes you back to Mother Earth, so in case all these devices and things don't work, you can sustain yourself.
What kind of group was it? Native American group, like Choctaw, Cheyenne?
No, it was all of them, I think.
Okay.
It was just based kind of like on the Indian principles. I may be misquoting, but I mean, it was very parallel to the Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts.
Gotcha.
They just, we didn't sell cookies.
Gotcha.
I feel like my science teachers growing up, they did excellent job, which intrigued me. Science is probably one of my favorite fields. As a formal, I don't remember.
So no one was like, the earth is heating up. Like no one.
No, I don't remember that.
I mean, because we've known since, like, officially that fossil fuels are heating the planet since the 80s. Like, Exxon knew, but they hid that information. And they started telling people, oh, it's on you. It's your responsibility to clean up after yourself, clean your environment. Where, like, it's completely not the case. They've been 40 years of pumping fossil fuels and pollutants into the atmosphere, knowing that that's what's causing it, but they just, you know, making a quick buck. Really wasn't a topic of conversation then at all, is what you're saying, like climate change or global warming. No. When did you first start hearing about global warming?
Probably not until the 90s.
And what did you think about it then? Were you like, holy shit? Or were you like...
At first I was like, I don't know. At first I really just thought it was, like, these are patterns. You know, you look back years ago and then it was really cold or it was really warm one year or, you know, whatever. Like, even when it snowed down here, that's not normal for it to snow. And then, but then, you know, you look at the hurricane patterns. Some years there's a lot, sometimes there's not. And, you know, you just put it off as it's a pattern. It's a natural pattern. It's Mother's Nature's way of rechecking herself or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah.
But when it continually happens year after year, to the extreme, you've got to, like, open your eyes and say, no, there's something going on here that's not right.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, with the snowing I was in 4th grade, so what was that, like 2009? I think we had started learning about climate change in 8th grade, so 4 years after the fact. But in my eyes, I never saw it as climate change. I thought it was only global warming. I thought the planet was just gonna get, like, super hot. But, like, the snowing in Louisiana, South Louisiana, that is not normal. And I actually found out recently it's because when the ice caps melt, it makes, like, this vortex. We have, like, you know, a line because the polar ice caps keep everything solid. Have I told you this before? Okay, so polar ice caps keep things solid. So it's like cold and then hot in the middle, and it spins, our Earth spins. So it keeps everything nicely in line. But with the ice caps melting and we're still spinning, now things are going like up and down instead of that nice, like, the
continual flow.
Right, what's expected and what's normal. But because they're melting, our climate patterns are kind of just shifting all over, just shifting with the way the Earth is rotating, which I never knew. But that's why, like, it's not just warming, it's everything is all thrown out.
Like, growing up, I don't remember the weatherman talking about an El Nino year, you know, anything like that.
My next question is, how has the news and media coverage about climate crisis changed over the years?
Oh, it's changed a lot. I mean, it's much more in the forefront of the news. It's opened up our eyes. I mean, like, before, you just put your trash in the trash can and then you knew it went to, like, a landfill. But then after that, I had no idea that people threw tons and tons and tons of trash into our oceans. I mean, that just appalled me.
Like, that's stupid.
Yes. And, you know, I don't know, I guess I just thought the magic trash fairy would take our trash away and boom, it'd be gone. Adios. I had no idea that it was affecting wildlife and our fishing, and which goes back to our health. When our fish and our food resources and plant resources aren't healthy, then it impacts us as a community.
Well, I will tell you one thing my professor repeated over the semester that really, like, blew my mind. It's really simple, but it makes a lot of sense. He said, the environment is a product of the activity of the organisms, not the other way around. The environment will affect the organisms, but overall, organisms produce the environment. So yes, like, having trash out in the ocean into our food sources, into us, is a direct result of our activities. Exactly what we are doing. not, the environment didn't put that trash there.
Right.
You know, like we did that. It just goes back to being one with nature. We are not separate from nature at all, and I think we forget that a lot of times. But like, you have a pretty good grasp about everything is connected, it seems like. I feel like you know.
Yes.
I've actually been having the solar panel company call me because I want to set solar panels up here.
Well, that's another thing. I have a friend that has solar panels. They charge $80 a month for solar panels. My electricity bill without solar panels, now granted the house that I'm speaking of is much larger than mine, but I have to pay a $50 electricity bill. Why would I want to pay $80 additional to have solar panels?
Yeah. No, and that's why
Again, it comes down to the economics of it.
right. And I think if like the government were to make it more affordable, because under the Obama administration it was, solar panels were cheap. Like, I remember going to Ithaca in New York and there were solar panels everywhere, and it's because they like hopped on that when the government was providing those incentives, and electric vehicles were a lot cheaper. But then you have a different administration, a different politician, different policies, and it just like screws everything up and makes it unaffordable and unattainable, which I don't think is right. Like, I think the technology is there, the resources are there, so why not distribute to the people? And it's because they want to keep making money off fossil fuels. I don't know if you agree with that, but I certainly don't. But I hear what you're saying, and I do think steps need to be taken.
I mean, it adds up. You pay $80 more for your electricity. You pay $20 more a month to recycle. There's $100 there. You pay, I don't know how much an electric car is, but it's probably more expensive than the average car to get the same features on it.
Right.
I mean, you're paying $10,000 more, say, for an electric car, and then it just makes it undoable for the normal American citizen.
Right. No, I 100% agree. But also, the sun is free. The sun is a free source of energy. And it's not the fact that we can't harness it. It's the fact that we're not allowing everyone to harness it. You know, it's not become an accessible thing. But your gasoline fuel car, yes, it is, absolutely, because that's where the money is. But I think we're getting ahead of ourselves here because we haven't seen these new rollouts with the, I know Biden has signed something where electric vehicles are going to be a lot cheaper, but we haven't seen that reflect in the market prices yet. But I know what you're saying, like, absolutely. And also, like, charging stations aren't nationwide, so would you even be comfortable taking your electric car to work where you could possibly like run out of charge? Probably not. And I 100% agree with that. Has there been anything that you've experienced in your lifetime that has like drastically or even minorly like shifted your view of climate change in general?
I guess going to Alaska.
Oh my God, yeah.
When we went and saw the glaciers breaking off, and they were saying how rapidly the glaciers are breaking off. I mean, I saw that in person, you know, popping and breaking off, and which is natural. They said, you know, it's natural for that to happen, but not the rate that it's happening. Mm-hmm. You know, just in, I may be misspeaking, but in the last, you know, few decades or so, they've seen a dramatic change in the glaciers melting.
No, that's right. That's definitely right. I remember that trip very well, and I think that's what I was like, oh, this is what wilderness, like real wilderness, looks like without cars and trains and electric light poles and houses everywhere. I was like, this is really beautiful. So I remember that trip very vividly. That definitely, which thank you for bringing me on, because it was a big part of, I think, who I am now, is seeing all that nature and like bringing that with me in life, you know. So thanks. It was a great trip. If you haven't been to Alaska, there's some really, really beautiful wilderness that might open your eyes.
I'm glad you were old enough to remember it.
Yeah.
Because I was afraid y'all were a little young.
No, I would definitely remember it, and I don't think until later in life did I like connect dots to that trip, you know? So that was really, really cool. Like even on my earth materials class, we talked about this mine in Alaska that has like the most copper, and copper is gonna be huge for solar panels and electric vehicles and all this like green technology. But the problem with that is the salmon and other fish are super, super sensitive to like metals. So they don't wanna mine, or they could mine, but it would kill like all the ecosystem there essentially.
Right.
I don't really have any more questions that my audience asked from you, but is there anything else you'd like to talk about, like why you feel a certain way about climate change, or why you don't feel so strongly about it, or anything like that?
I'm definitely not as passionate.
Sorry, camera shut off. But anyway, as you're saying.
I think there's things that I could do to help with, you know, that I could individually change, and then maybe, like you said, have a ripple effect. And then one person changing, someone else seeing the change, and then we can go from there. I don't know, you get older, which is an excuse. You can get caught up in life of going to work and taking care of children and just surviving daily. You know, sometimes we don't stop and see the beautiful world that we have around us, and that we're destroying it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and then we think we're just so minuscule that we're not going to make a difference.
Yeah. We forget that this earth is a gift.
The older I'm getting and the less responsibilities I have, I'm seeing, you know, I'm seeing it more.
Yeah, we could start like a climate conversation in your neighborhood. That might be good. It's just always interesting talking and seeing how people feel, and I think the general consensus is that this is too big for just one person. And it is, it absolutely is, but if you connect with other people who feel like that, you, like you said, could get a lot done. So I think just having conversations like this outside of your normal social bubble, or within your social bubble that you never really bring up, because it is kind of deep. Like, it's not like a small talk conversation, like, oh, so Hurricane Ida and climate change, you know, you don't bring that up over coffee, but it's necessary if we do want change. So that's all I'm gonna say on that. Okay, well, thank you so much for coming on my channel. I hope you had some insights or some new ways of thinking about things. I know I definitely more hear where you're coming from, and I think other people too. So I think this is a series I'm gonna do on my channel, like interviewing different people about climate change, how they grew up with it, what they think about it, and all those sorts of things. But I had no idea you were Miss Mother Earth over here. Makes a lot of sense.
I was.
I feel like you could be again. You could definitely have a garden.
Yeah.
Out back or out front, like if your grass isn't growing, just plant a garden. Well, that's gonna be all. Thank y'all so much for tuning in. Again, if you want to follow me on Instagram, it's at Earth or Nothing. I'll have my other social links down below, my Depop, my Spotify, because yeah, why not? Don't forget to be kind to yourself, be kind to others, and be kind to the planet. And I will catch y'all in my next video. Bye.
Bye.